Even when we want to achieve net zero in 2050, the energy transition will not end in 2050. A lot of people have in their mind, okay, it's now a race until 2050 and then it's a stable system and nothing will change anymore. No, that's not the case. We will see a lot of CCS and blue hydrogen or gas-fired power plants or even coal-fired power plants still in the world where you just separate carbon dioxide and store it. But that is a bridge, and we will, in the years after 2050, still have to replace fossil fuels from these processes to come closer to a non-fossil fuel world. Therefore, I think it makes sense, beside promoting and finding the right regulation around the ongoing technologies and the ongoing nuclear projects, that we also think about what is the right answer for the future.
Hello and welcome to Energy Unplugged by Aurora. This podcast features various experts from Aurora having in-depth conversations with key industry leaders, policymakers and academics from all over the world. It explores the hottest topics across the energy market and gives a unique perspective on major energy issues.
Welcome to the Energy Unplugged podcast by Aurora Energy Research. From the Aurora team today, I'm Felix Chow-Kambitsch. With me is Boris Schucht, the CEO of Urenco. Boris, welcome to the show.
Hi, Felix. Nice to be here.
Great. So to begin with, I'm quite interested in Urenco. So Urenco it's a pretty large company, but perhaps not everyone, generally speaking, outside the energy industry knows the company Urenco. So would you be able to give me a sort of brief intro of who Urenco is and what you do?
Thank you, Felix, for this question. That's very kind of you. Yes, Urenco is really not well known in public because we are a typical B2B, business-to-business company. We are the enrichment company, one of the enrichment companies in the world, by far biggest in the Western world, with nearly all nuclear power plants in the Western world and in major parts of the world as our customers. So what do? We are the one who is enriching uranium so that it can be used in the existing nuclear power plants for energy production. So this part we are delivering as a service provider for the nuclear power plants, but we also sell the complete product chain. So when the customer wants to buy the final end product, EUP, enriched uranium, that is also fine, but our core business is really the enrichment of uranium.
I see. So it's quite crucial for the nuclear plants around the world where you'll be providing the enriched fuel for these plants and
exactly.
Okay.
And we are doing that in 4 sites all over the world. So one site in the UK in Capenhurst, one site in the Netherlands, Almelo, one site in Germany in Grona, and one site in New Mexico in the US. And from there we are delivering this product to the nuclear power plants of the world.
Excellent. Well, thanks for the introduction of Urenco. And what about a bit about yourself? So you joined Urenco about 2 years ago, but before that you were at 50 Hertz, leading 50 Hertz, which is a German transmission system operator. What about Urenco attracted you to the role?
Yeah, that's right. I have a long career. Thank you for that question again. I have a long career in the energy sector and in the energy business. And I did 50 Hertz as a transmission business for nearly 10 years, so nearly a decade. But I'm a nuclear engineer, maybe one of the last ones who studied that in Germany, but I'm a nuclear engineer. And I am of the strong belief that nuclear will play a role in the world also in the future and in combating climate change. And that's why I said to myself, well, I want to do also something else, and nuclear is something interesting for me. And last but not least, what is also interesting, before that, I was responsible for a regulated business, and I was missing a little bit customers. So and at Urenco, we have a huge customer base so 50 customers in countries all over the world. That is something which is nice. And I was seeking for new challenge where I'm back really on the front with customers.
Great. So it's interesting. So in a way, you're going back to your roots as a nuclear engineer.
Yeah, I forgot most of that, I must say, but that's right. Going back to the roots, at least to one element of this, a very important element, as fuel production is a real important element in the whole value chain of nuclear. Yeah.
Great. So I would like to start our conversation off with talking a little bit about the energy transition. We're recording this segment right now in December of 2021, a month after the COP26 conference in Glasgow. And actually, you were up in Glasgow speaking about how Urenco can support the global decarbonization ambition. So from COP26, what are your key takeaways from the conference?
For me, it was the fifth COP conference where I somehow participated, either in delegations or with speeches or just listening. And I must say, first of all, I think what is becoming more obvious that more and more countries of the world are committed to reach climate target and to combat climate change. That is, I think, a very important message. The commitment is clearly rising. But also at the same time, I would say the understanding around the challenges to achieve net zero and to achieve these climate targets are also rising. So it makes it more, I would say, real. And it's not only about talking about measures and about targets anymore. It's talking about real measures, real activities in the near future. That I must say I like that, because it becomes more and more part of our day-to-day business life, day-to-day political life. How do we achieve the next step? And that, I think, is something where COP26 made a change. And last but not least, the third thing I would like to mention that was interesting for me, nuclear in the former COPs never played a big role. And this year, I could see that a lot of countries are considering nuclear as an important element in their strategy to combat climate change, to achieve the climate targets. And so the awareness around the role of nuclear is changing, and nuclear was on the agenda, was discussed around COP26, even in the blue zone, and that was not the case in the past. I personally believe, and we will, I guess, come back on that, we need all technical options that we have. The challenge is so big, and I will explain that later on a little bit more. The challenge is so big, we can't exclude individual technical options. And nuclear is, as a CO2-free technology, a very important option for CO2-free energy.
Yeah, so I mean, I certainly see your view about how it's becoming more of a serious commitment around the world, around internationally, to tackle climate change, and there's a lot more practical commitments rather than lofty ideals. So useful to hear those views from yourself. And I'd like to pick up your point on nuclear's role, and Urenco is a key part of the nuclear industry. For Urenco, at Urenco, what do you see as Urenco's role in delivering net zero?
Before I will answer this question, let me elaborate on one other topic. I think it's important to understand how huge the challenge in total is. And I think the question around, is it really possible to reach the 1.5 or 1.6 or whatever the target at the end of the day will be the final target? And it makes sense to look a little bit on what we have achieved so far and where do we stand and what does it in practice really means in the next 20 to 30 years to achieve net zero. And we are currently in our public debate very often mainly focused on the electricity demand. So and a lot of countries, Central Europe, the UK, we are somewhere in a range of nowadays 50% renewables in the electricity system in that range, whether it's 45 or in a windy year then 55. But we are really, and that is a huge success that could be achieved with a lot of efforts over the last 20 and 30 years. But when we look a little bit more in detail on it, you see that half of this is waste, biomass, or hydropower, where the growth potentials are not there anymore, where we have covered most of the potentials that are possible. So, and when you look then on the two major growth areas, that is wind, onshore and offshore wind, plus PVs or solar power, then we are somewhere in this range of 25% or 30%, depends where you look, in which country you're looking at it. But this is only part of the electricity system. And the electricity is only 1/5 to 1/7, also depending where you look and in which year you look on the primary energy consumption. Then the question is the primary energy consumption the right number to look at? Clearly not, but it gives an indication of the energy, of the total energy demand of a society. So in the moment, we are with solar and wind at around 10% for Europe. That's, I think, the number, which is covered by solar and wind from the primary energy demand. Of course, the question is when you go more into electrification with more renewables, primary energy demand will go down. Of course, it will go down. But the more hydrogen you want on the other side will add, because you can't electrify all processes. And there are a lot of processes which will stay or which will need a conventional liquid or gas fuel. Then you, which is then in the future most likely hydrogen based, then the primary energy consumption will rise again. So, and what does it say? What does it tell me? We have achieved with a huge effort in the last 20 to 30 years. We have achieved 10%. Is it realistic then, when we exclude technologies like nuclear power, to achieve the next 90% or 80%, however is needed, in the next 20 to 30 years? I think we all underestimate. That is something I read more and more, and I see more and more in the discussions with politicians, with the media, and also the experts, that we all underestimate a little bit the challenge to really meet climate targets. And that's why I come to a very clear conclusion. When we take these climate targets serious, we will need also nuclear as a CO2-free technology, as a CO2-free option to contribute to achieve net zero.
Yeah, of course, because I guess really to emphasize how ambitious the 2 degree or 1.5 degree, which is 1.5 degrees really where we want to be, as the scientific community has recommended. So it's a very ambitious goal here, and I really see a point where already we've made a lot of strides in solar and wind, but also, you know, we want to open up our possibilities of how we decarbonize the remaining parts and really get to that 1.5 degree target. So including nuclear is quite important. So very much agree to your point, and you know, based on that, then so more to my initial question, I'd be curious to see how Urenco yourself, you know, how do you see Urenco playing a role in that net zero transition?
Yeah, I'm happy to come back now to the original question. I think Urenco can contribute in two aspects. First aspect, we deliver the fuel for one CO2-free technology. So we can, and us as a part of an industry, can offer societies one piece in the puzzle as a solution for tackling this huge challenge. And I'm very proud of that. I think within Urenco, we always say we are part of saving the world. That's what we can be and what we are. And that's something where Urenco can really contribute day by day by producing our product as cheap as possible, as safe as possible, as reliable as possible, and offering by that an option to societies. At the end, societies have to decide themselves whether they want and how much they want to use this option. That's not our decision and not our responsibility, but it is our responsibility to offer this option. We are offering one option for saving the world. And the second topic is, of course, our own contribution. And we are strongly committed to meet net zero already 10 years ahead. So 2040, we signed this year, the pledge of achieving net zero in 2040. And we are strongly committed to that. We are in the moment really on all sides elaborating and evaluating the different options, how to achieve that, and also how do we then go one level deeper to our suppliers and to make sure that we get also the CO2 savings on this level. And that is a challenging journey for an organization because nobody was focused on that. The processes are not there. So we are, as a company ourselves, strongly committed, and we are implementing in the moment the processes. We are hiring the resources that are needed for that so that we ourselves can contribute also to this target by our own emissions, by reducing our own emissions until 2040 to zero.
Yeah, so certainly, major challenge, but Urenco has an important role in both delivering the low carbon fuel, the zero carbon fuels, as well as corporately. I think there's a responsibility there as well. And actually, this brings us quite neatly to the next topic I want to discuss is actually Urenco and Aurora. We did a study together recently on pairing hydrogen and nuclear and how those two can be very complementary, the hydrogen and nuclear in providing a zero carbon source of energy for some hard to abate sectors. So from this study, what are there any sort of key messages you want to highlight from this study?
I'm very happy to do so, but I would like a little bit to maybe point out why we did this study first. As I said before, I think the role of the industry on such important issues like the energy supply, which is a very political issue, our role is that we offer solutions and that we offer elements into a debate which can then lead to an informed political decision. And we were participating on a wider hydrogen study a year ago with Aurora, but with a lot of other players of the UK market, where we understood very well the needs for hydrogen to replace fossil fuels in industries like the chemistry industry, steel production, heavy duty transportation, or whatever it is, where it's difficult to electrify these processes. So that was, I think, a very good study that was initiated by Aurora, and we just participated as one partner in there because we were also interested, and we think it makes sense to contribute to these kind of analysis so that societies understand what is needed for the future. But one question was not answered in there. What is really the best way of producing hydrogen on large scale, and what role should renewables play in there, and what role could nuclear play in there? And the UK as an island is, I think, a very, very good example to make such an investigation. It's an industrial state, and it's not as much connected like Belgium, for example, to the neighboring countries. So it's really the conclusions that you can get on a study like that on the UK. You can use that as a really good example for also other regions in the world. And so our intention was, okay, what is to contribute to this discussion? And we did not know what the outcome would be. So we said, well, I think it's for us. We want to understand our future and where are business cases for us and where are they not, and on what future do we have as a company have to prepare. But on the other side, I think also it's our obligation to I like that as a kind of sponsoring or as a kind of social donation, let me call that like that, to offer societies these kind of studies. And we said, well, why not going with you, with Aurora, into an independent study where it was your study and not it was paid by us, but not really influenced too much by us, and bring partners, other partners who are interested in the same question, the IAA, for example, or the nuclear operator in the UK, on board to understand a little bit better what role could we play. What was interesting for me, first of all, not what was interesting, I was highly impressed about the quality of debates around the assumptions, around the scenarios, and I must say that was a really, really well developed study, and I was heavily impressed of the work Aurora did there. That is maybe the first important message, but then the conclusions of the study, to share them. What are the three most important conclusions for me? The first one was, that's important when you have a top-down view on results. We are all experienced in the energy sector. When you look at it, does it look reasonable? When you achieve the targets, when you achieve the thing that you want to achieve, does the overall picture look somehow reasonable, or does it look unrealistic? Is that a realistic picture? And I must say, yes, we achieve all the targets, the climate target for the UK in these scenarios, in the set of scenarios that Aurora has defined. And the overall picture, top down, looks realistic. And that is something which is, for me, yes, achieving the targets, and it's a realistic picture. That's the first very, very important, I would say, result of this. The second one is, and that was, I was a little bit surprised on that, because in this study, first time logistic costs and the technical possibilities of combining nuclear with hydrogen production have been included. And the result was, I was a little bit surprised by that, was that in all the scenarios, you could see a cost effect by including nuclear. So the more nuclear you included for the hydrogen production for a lot of 24 hours, 7 days a week processes, it created a cost advantage. The cost advantage was, I think, somewhere around 6 to 9% of the total system spend until 2050, which is really an impressive result. And there is a technical consequence of that, because it has shown this advantage gets bigger and bigger the more high temperature nuclear you include. And why that? Because when you avoid going too much the path around electricity to produce hydrogen, when you go directly from heat to hydrogen, then you can reduce the electricity consumption heavily, and the overall efficiency of the process gets really, really much higher. This effect was never in these kind of studies looked at. And so for me, the conclusion is it can be cost efficient, but then the nuclear sector has to combine hydrogen with nuclear, using also the heat of nuclear power plants. And for the next generation of nuclear power plants, it would lead to the consequence that you have to go, or that it would be more efficient to go for high temperature reactors. So when on all the R&D advice that we could give is, yes, in the nuclear sector, when you go for new generation of nuclear power plants, then high temperature reactors play a better role. And the third result, I must say, is, yes, this is a result study made for the UK, but as the UK is a good example of an industrialized country, you can use the results also for a lot of other regions in the world, where the effect will be pretty much the same. So that are the three new insights we got from the study. And my impression, at least, was in all the discussions that we had on the political arena, but also with NGOs and with other players in this whole debate, that was an interesting outcome, and it was perceived very well that this study has been made and is now available as an element for this discussion.
Yes, I mean, certainly in having, and on the other end of the study where we were looking into the details within the Aurora team, I think what you're emphasizing about the benefits of having hydrogen production with the new generation of nuclear technologies, that's something that is often underappreciated, and I think there's a lot that we can look at in the complementarities between hydrogen and nuclear. So certainly a worthwhile contribution, I think, to the debate.
Absolutely. I share this view, and I'm pretty sure it will have also consequence for all R&D efforts worldwide on SMRs, RMRs, and also the setup of the ongoing projects like in the UK, Hinkley Point or Sizewell, where it makes sense to think through how does the energy system look like in 20, 30, and 50, 60 years, because these power plants will operate so long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so on the theme of the future of nuclear, and you've already emphasized you think there's a big potential there for nuclear in this energy transition. But generally, do you think nuclear energy is underrated or overrated in your opinion?
We all know that each society has to make up their mind what risks they want to take and what role different energy sources should play. And the risk perceptions are very different on each country. Just making a comparison, in Germany, we love to drive 250 kilometers an hour on our highways. We have no problem with taking this risk, but we don't like, the societies don't like the nuclear. That is one element of the debate. I think that is a political debate, and that needs to continue. And each country will come to different conclusions. But then there is a different, that is more the commercial and the ecological view on that. And I think you are completely right when you're asking this question. I think nuclear have been somehow underrated as a CO2-free technology and which role it can play, with all the advantages and disadvantages that we all know there. But at the end of the day, this challenge of achieving net zero, of organizes energy transition, is for some regions in the world nearly impossible when you exclude nuclear. Take the example of the Czech Republic or Poland, very much dependent on coal. Not having, Czech Republic have not even a connection to any sea, so offshore wind is not an option for them. So there is either photovoltaic, a little bit of biomass, which they already use, and then it's nothing, or nuclear. So, and we have to accept that a lot of regions in the world do not have so many options. That's why we see now that more and more countries try to understand, okay, what alternatives do we really have to act in the coming years, in the coming 10, 20 years? And then you see that is now something which is really changing in the perception. Nuclear is one of the options that are discussed in these regions, how to organize the energy transition and how to meet their climate targets, which I think is a reasonable approach. And that's how it will, I believe, go on.
And your example of Germany is quite interesting, because as you suggest, every country, every society has their own decisions they need to make on regarding nuclear. How should you recommend different country societies determine whether nuclear is suitable for their decarbonization plans?
It depends very much what alternatives do you have. When you have a lot of hydropower, and like Norway, and also a lot of wind, which they have not really used so much so far, then you can say, well, you don't need nuclear. There is no need for that. Yes, of course, it's when you have hydropower, potentials available, but look at the world. Most of the hydropower potentials are already fully explored. So there is not a lot growth anymore possible. And the ecological effect of adding, on this example, additional hydropower is huge. And that's why a lot of countries say, no, we don't want more hydropower than we already use. That's the limit. Otherwise, the damage on our ecological systems are too high. So you have to choose, and each country has to do that. Each region have to do that on the alternatives that we have available, and therefore a lot of regions will come to the conclusions we love the renewable energies, and that is the right thing to do. But we need additional energy sources, and then it comes very fast to nuclear.
Yeah. So every country has to make that own calculus, and part of that is what other options they have. And yes. I mean, us being in the UK, both of us right now, we're in a, sort of the UK government has actually seems to be choosing nuclear as part of the mix, and we recently heard in the news that the UK government has committed to funding a fleet of small modular reactors, SMRs, with Rolls-Royce, but also there's generally further funding for nuclear advancement in things like advanced modular reactors. What are your thoughts on these SMRs and AMRs?
I think what is the UK has also done something. They have already funded Hinkley Point, and they are discussing to find a solution, a regulation around the next nuclear power plant, which would be Sizewell. And I think that's all the right thing to do. You need to do both. You need, on the one side, to drive forward the existing projects to get them into operation within the next 10, 15 years. But you have also to drive for the next generation of nuclear power plants, for the technologies that we need them in 20 and 30 years. Even when we want to achieve net zero in 2050, the energy transition will not end in 2050. A lot of people have in their mind, okay, it's now a race until 2050, and then it's a stable system and nothing will change anymore. No, that's not the case. We will see a lot of CCS and blue hydrogen or gas-fired power plants, or even coal-fired power plants still in the world, where you just separate carbon dioxide and store it. But that is a bridge, and we will, in the years after 2050, still have to replace fossil fuels from these processes to come closer to a non-fossil fuel world. Therefore, I think it makes sense, beside promoting and finding the right regulation around the ongoing technologies and the ongoing nuclear projects, that we also think about what is the right answer for the future. And the right answer for the future, I think they said, we learned a few lessons in the nuclear sector. These existing nuclear power plants, they became very, very big. So the size effect was perceived as the main target in designing them. Nowadays, we all believe maybe the next generation of nuclear power plants should follow a different philosophy. And the philosophy should be smaller, but therefore more predictable, and maybe efficiency gains by standardized production in factories. Yeah? And that's the idea of the SMRs and RMRs, which are under development. And I think there are something above 70 projects worldwide around these technologies. Of course, not all of them will survive, and some are mainly paper projects and maybe will remain paper projects, but some of them are already getting reality. And that is something which is very, very good. And I think the UK government has a very balanced political approach in supporting both developments. First, the development of the existing nuclear power plants or the existing project, and on the other side, having also a view on the next generation that is then needed in 10, 20 years. So to have them available end of this decade. And I think that makes both very much sense.
So it's really for, the R&D function within nuclear to not all of these projects will turn out, but then you need to investigate whether they are in fact the right ones. And in a sense, with R&D and energy, I think a lot of the focus in energy has been on things like solar and wind and batteries. But in a sense, nuclear, there's also a whole parallel R&D as well. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts as to what future advancements in nuclear looks like. Are there any things you might want to highlight about the future of nuclear?
I'm coming a little bit from the market and from the business models. And I see two main business drivers for nuclear. The one is really a result of our study. What is the right combination with hydrogen production? And then it comes to the conclusion we need it would be beneficial when you go for high temperature reactor concepts, which would be much more efficient than on the hydrogen production, which is really an advantage. And you can combine them, these units on one side to a kind of gigafactory concept, which we discussed. And I believe that is one business model. Keeping the individual unit as small that you can produce it in factories, that you can go maybe in the direction of type approval, so not approving an airport anymore, but a plane. That is a different philosophy. So that when you have once an approval, a permission license for a plane, you don't have to get a new license for every other plane with the same design. So it's a type license. The similar approach, I think, would make a lot of sense when we move in the nuclear industry a little bit more into this direction, that not each power plant becomes a very individual project with a very individual permission procedure. So the more we can standardize in this process, the better it is. And the second business model and business driver that I can observe already, which is under discussion, is the retrofitting of existing coal-fired power plants. How can you replace existing coal-fired power plants on their side by a nuclear device? And so once again, standardization, but you have there often very well-educated people. You have a high acceptance of a site, of a power plant site in the local communities, and these kind of things. And you see the first project, that is the Romanian project that had been published at COP26, is exactly one of these projects where actually the challenge is to replace coal by nuclear. And I think that is the next business driver. Once again, what does it mean for the nuclear technology standardization, and thinking about what elements of the site can be reused, grid connection, transformer station, and these kind of things. So by that also keep the total cost of the system as low as possible.
That's really interesting, Boris, because what you've emphasized there is in terms of innovations in how we do things, that the technology is potentially there already. It's just about really trying to standardize and make the approvals process a lot easier. So it seems like a advancement in ways of working rather than the technology itself.
On the technology side, there's also, I think, the potential for huge steps forward. The power plant designs that are currently used are the designs of the 80s. And already when I was at university, we were discussing designs which were much more efficient and much safer. And I give you an example from our part of this value chain, the fuel. And nowadays, for new power plant concepts, discussing so-called tresol fuel, where the uranium is covered by ceramic covers, and each small ball of uranium, which is maybe 1 millimeter wide, is then a containment in itself. And so this is a very safe fuel in itself, because even when you have a huge mechanical damage, only very few of these small little uranium pieces or ceramic pieces will crack, and radioactive material could escape. So that is something completely different. And there are a lot of these things which I think we will see in these ongoing SMR and RMR projects, and some of them will be seen as really an advantage, and they will survive and they will win the race, and other ones will disappear against some other ideas. So that there will be also, there's still a lot of room for technical development and for innovation in the nuclear sector.
Well, we're getting close to the end of our time, but before we close, I'd like to take a step back and look into the future. We talked about the COP26 targets with Paris Agreement target of below 2 degrees and potentially even 1.5 degrees target. What do you think is needed to ensure these targets are met?
First of all, I think what is needed is a lot of optimism and engagement. And we are all, and the industries, I think, has really changed. We are all somehow nowadays activists for climate change and for climate targets. And we are doing all our best. The perception within the industry, what is our role? What is our role to really make a better world? That is completely different than 10 or 20 years ago. When I look at my kids, they're even stronger. That for them, they have grown up with it. It's for them normal that is one of the big challenges that we want to achieve, but we want to really make sure that we really get these targets done. So I'm pretty optimistic myself. I think the world is able to do that. There are challenges, political challenges, technical challenges, economical challenges, social challenges. That will be one of the big topic clearly in the future. But they are all manageable. You can discuss them. We have platforms to discuss them, like the COP conferences. And I see that the world is more and more moving from discussing simply long-term targets. We are moving into action mode. We are taking action year by year by year, whether it's politically or whether it's in the industry and in the societies. We are taking year by year actions. And that is, I think, the right way forward. That's why I believe personally, as an activist for climate change and for the energy transition, we will achieve these targets.
And an optimistic note to end on. Well, Boris, this conversation has been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Felix, for having me here, and I enjoyed it very much. Thank you very much.
That was Felix Chow-Kambitsch, Head of Commission Projects for Western Europe at Aurora, speaking to Boris Schucht, CEO of Urenco. Do keep an eye on our podcast feed for more in-depth conversations with senior members of the energy industry. The best way to do this is to subscribe on whatever platform you use. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.